Testing, testing. Tonight, we are going to listen to something that will bust your sides. I was laying down on the floor in the bathroom. Mike was on the outside, and Bob had about 3 or 4 things to do before the house could sell. And one of them, and it wasn't on the list, it's just Bob knew it. When you turn the outside spigot on, it leaked under the sink in the bedroom, bathroom that goes into the bedroom. And so Mike and I just said, let's just go on over and we'll do what we can, and we finished up the projects. So I was the only one that could lay down to get under the sink. And I got my phone on, and Mike's out there, and I say, start screwing. He starts screwing. I make sure the copper's all right and everything. And then we decided we were going to do something else, and I said, go turn the water off outside at the meter. And Mike got down and couldn't get up. And so he calls Bob, and they're sitting, huh?
I didn't call him. When I got back in, I was out of breath and everything. I told him, I'm not going back out there unless you stand there while help me out.
It was hilarious. Grunting and groaning and huffing, and if you grab me this way, if I can get to my knees, and I'm laying down there in the, I thought, I should have recorded this.
But you did tell him about the mattress you had to lay on.
Oh yeah, I had a couple of nice mats. It was, and this is what happened. I told Donna, I said, with this new bike of hers, we're going to take yoga just so we can get on and off the bike. Kevin takes a leaping jump and gets on his. All right, those are not the announcements, it's the 12th. You still waiting for test, Jimmy? No, that is old. Read the bulletin. That's a new saying, read the bulletin. Tara's grandfather, the one with the brain bleed, too old to do surgery, passed away. So continue to remember Tara and the family. Anything else? All right, Janet Wolf, I saw her this afternoon, and they've done major. You know, this is the 4th time, and finally they went and they've done a larger area with a new material. And then I think she's told me she's going to take like 3 months off work. And I would too. You know, you bust it and tear it apart to go work for Walmart. No. And she's got long and short-term insurance, so pray everything goes well for her. And I think she said that Linda Gardner's daughter-in-law was having surgery, and I couldn't find out anything about it, so. Yeah, Lee Seibert's back there. He lost part of his leg and his nose, but he's doing all right. What would be for me. All right, remember the Wednesday night meal started tonight, and it went extremely well. So remember those. Next week, not too sure what we're going to have. But pizza night. That's always very popular. Do what? Yeah. All right. The question that I've got tonight concerning fellowship is if we have a joint connection with people over a common cause, is that fellowship? In other words, if I've got something that I have a common interest in, a cause, an issue or something with other religious people, and anything that pulls me this way is going to pull me away from who? From God. And so even though these things may be good and they may be proper, I've got to be careful that it doesn't pull me away from my Lord. What I have in mind here, you could take two people who either don't really know each other, and even within the church, but if you get a common cause, one common cause is animals. Let's just say that Chris and I just kind of merely go our own way, and you bring, let's say he likes horses or motorcycles, and that common interest pulls us together. And as long as it doesn't pull us away from Christ, and with even some religious causes within the denominational world can have a tendency to pull me away from what God says. What was Promise Keepers known for? What? All right, keeping your promise. And I don't need Promise Keepers to do. I'm just not one of those people that's got to have that sort of thing to do what God asked me to do. But is our nation hurting within the family? One of the major things, and things like, and let me just give you this, Louis Farrakhan. You know who Louis Farrakhan is? He was the one who organized the Million Man March. He was interviewed by Barbara Walters. And you come away thinking he's one of the greatest men in the world. He is a Muslim. He's a demigod. He is a racist. And what he brought black people together with was that American men, black American men, have gone AWOL with their families. They are just not there. What used to happen in the ghetto, when you've got black on black crimes, and these things are not racist. This is not a racist nation because there are more blacks than whites in a prison or in jail or being arrested. And yet that's the way it's sold. I tell you, the new one that I have seen, and that is Proposition 4 for the state of Arkansas. You familiar with that? And how it advertises it. All right, we're going to legalize cannabis, a drug, marijuana. And if we legalize it, the police are not going to have to go after and spend their time and waste their time on minor crime. And we're going to give millions to the police department from the legalizing of drugs. Ask a policeman. States have even now, it's not illegal to take methamphetamines. And we've got states that are doing this. And I'm thinking, now here I am, an ignorant preacher, and I'm listening to this advertisement for the state of Arkansas, and I'm thinking, are we not listening? Are we an ignorant, stupid people that would legalize drugs in this state? And they don't hide the fact. They tell you, we're going to legalize drugs. And we're thinking, well, it gives more money to the government. The state of Florida had gambling. And here's one thing you will find about the government, and I'm nonpartisan on this, that something is wrong and illegal until the government can figure out how to tax it. New Zealand has taxed prostitution. First country to legalize it. And things are immoral. How come that you can gamble at the grocery store, but you can't gamble on a football game between me and John? That's legalized. They get tax off it, so it's all right. But it's not all right for me and John to do it. And so this Farrakhan brought blacks and whites together. And even if I'm not a black man, I will join in a cause if it's going to help the home. But when you have over 70% of homes black that do not have a male figure in it, it is now plaguing white families. There is no male model. There is no male authority. And when you mention that, they're going to cry about it anyway because you're dominating a woman. It has nothing whatsoever to do with dominating anybody. But our children misbehave because they don't see it modeled within parents, especially a father. The father's not there. And it is now catching white families. It is a crisis. And so you've got things like promise keepers. Who can not agree with promise keepers? They have severed promises. Uh-huh. Right. And we're going to look at that. And so it's what we have in common. It is a common cause, but it's not fellowship. It's just a common cause that we're involved in. All right. Uh-huh. But you take a Muslim who has 5 wives, every one of them is on government assistance. So you've got 1 man, 5 wives, and you've got 14 children, every one of them receiving money from the government. When is it right to have 5 wives, 4 wives, 3 wives? It's like, say, there is a program called, and I had to force myself to watch it, but it's called The Whites. And they're out of Virginia or West Virginia, one or the other. And grandfather taught his daughter how to use the government, how never to work but get every dime she possibly could. And there was 3 or 4 generations where they teach, here's what you can do. You never have to work. All right, just hold off a minute. I was watching another program from Conway, Arkansas, who have a major problem in the area just outside of Conway. There is a Hispanic dealer right there. And he sells the drugs to Granny. And Granny was in the sheriff's car, and he said, I can't do a thing about it. It's so bad. She then gets in the man who's doing the document, and this woman looks like she's 90 years old. And she said, I sell drugs to this person as they're driving along the road. I sell drugs to that person. She's selling drugs to everybody. And if the dealer is shot and killed, they said Mexico will have a dealer out there the very next day. And the sheriff said, we are helpless. There's nothing that we can do about it. All right, so what can draw us together is things like promise keepers. Is there anything about promise keepers that draws me away from my allegiance with God? And one of the things is the promises and the oaths that they take violate my allegiance to God. So I can keep my promises. I can encourage the men to keep their promises. But when I join with something like promise keepers, I'm being drawn away from my God. All right, let's go to the idea of, if there was a march here in Farmington, put on by a religious group against abortion, would you march? Do what? Yeah, I think we should. Part of the problem, Mary Sue, is we get so hung up with who gets the praise. Well, the Methodists did this. They organized I am there and I'm standing as a representative of God. This is what God says. Some people don't like it when you preach or teach politics. It is not politics. When a politician violates God's word, you'd better hear from a man of God, and you'd better hear from a Christian. I don't care if he's Democrat or Republican up there who's done whatever it is that's against God's will. We as children of God ought to speak up, but we don't, and why not? Who was known for the petitions against abortion clinics? What religious group? Who? The Catholics. And I'm not too sure they do a whole lot of good. I think it's long term. I think it's more than just demonstrating. If I'm going to demonstrate against an abortion clinic, what solutions do I have for that mother long term? If you're going to tell your children that they cannot associate with certain people, who can they associate with? Because if you take their friends out, there's an empty hole and Satan will fill it. Okay. And then you have a choice. All right. All right. How much money does the state of Arkansas get with gambling? Other people's. They haven't got a dime of my money. The state of Florida took their education budget and did away with it. And they used gambling money to substitute it. And they came up short. And then there was an interview between the governor of Florida and Georgia, and it was still cheaper in Florida or in Georgia to have an education than Florida. Most of the money from gambling does not go to poor, indigent families. It goes to people who are elite or those that have made certain grades, and they get rewarded. All right, so in the book of 2 Timothy chapter 4 and in verse 2 beginning, we are to preach the word and we are to be instant in season and out of season. Which means when it is convenient for us and it's pleasant for us and when it's unpleasant. And brethren, some preaching and teaching is very unpleasant. Because it hits me where it hurts. All right, let's look at this. Let's go back to the home and common causes. I'll march, I don't care who it is out here, that comes up with something good for the family, something to mentor our young folks. The divorce rate. What occupation has the highest divorce rate? Police? Who? Doctors? Fire department? The number one is a casino manager, 52.9. Bartenders, 52.7. Flight attendants are at about 50%. Telemarketing, 49.2. And physicians, telemarketers. And physicians and surgeons are at 21.8. Preachers, clergy, is at 19.8%. What is the highest state for divorce? Alaska, New York, California, Nevada. Who's number 2? The state of Arkansas. This kind of floors you, doesn't it? At the percent per 1,000 that divorce. Nevada is 4.2. And Arkansas is second. The divorce rate has gone from 28% in 1990 to 40% today. Fewer people are getting divorced. That's something to celebrate, isn't it? Fewer people are getting married. And the New Zealand government told young ladies who were pregnant, if you don't name the name of your father, we'll take care of you in free government housing and subsidize everything until that child's 18. Guess what they did? Who's the daddy? I don't know.
He set it up where as long as these black or any woman stayed single, they could get benefits.
Mhm.
As soon as they got married, they
There is an attack on the American family. And what we used to look at and look down at is now affecting middle class white families. No male figure there. And we as male figures ought to be showing our family God. Fathers, do you realize that you train your young sons how to treat their wife to be? Who has learnt something from their father on how to treat your wife? Got 2 at the back. There's characteristics that you learn subconsciously from your father, what is acceptable and not acceptable with your wife. And so, if there is a common cause, and it is a common cause, not a common fellowship, we can join in it, as long as it doesn't take us away from our allegiance to God. And if the church, it's a problem in the church. Male leadership within the home. And what Promise Keepers can do, they can fill a football stadium of 50,000, love each other, that praise God and hug each other, and they cry. One of their promises is it has to do with unity that is not based to doctrine. So one thing that amazes me about organizations like this that are good in their cause, and they cry for unity, and then they all go back to division. This is one of the problems I had with a young man who stopped by the office wanting a unity meeting of all the churches in Farmington Prairie Grove. How do you do that outside of doctrine? You have to lay doctrine aside. So there is no, this is what God said. This is what we must do. And for him to walk in and say, well, I know that you'll emphasize baptism. The Bible does. And if the Bible does, we ought to be standing there. And so a lot of the times what we can do is we can join in a good cause as long as it doesn't take us away from our allegiance to God. Number 6 of the promise keepers is to commit to reaching beyond any racial or denominational barriers to demonstrate the power of biblical unity. And then they go back to biblical division. Now, can I, as a child of God, make such a promise? And that's what you've got to look at. So it's not a matter of common fellowship because you join with a religious group over a cause. That's not fellowship. That's simply a common cause. John 3, verses 3 and 5. There you've got John saying to Nicodemus through writing, Christ saying, you got to be born again. We have read and we have studied verses 3 and verses 5 and plenty of others that said you must be baptized to be in fellowship or in Christ. And that's the commonality we have. That's the only ones that we can fellowship with. Fellowship means what? It means what? Intimate relationships. What illustration do I give? Donna. But there's another one, fellowship, fellows in the same ship. Who was saved in the ark? Everybody that was in it. I once said 12, didn't I? And in the movie, there are 2 arks. Noah's in one, and Abraham and his family are in the other. Do you know how old they had to be? And a little 7-year-old girl came to church with a piece of paper and was telling in her Bible class every biblical mistake that movie made. Yeah. No, this would have been old. Well, I don't know, but the little girl was... It was in color. Mm-hmm. And you got 2 arcs that kind of tie up and they talk to each other and then go their way. But you stop and think what Peter said about those that were in the ark. They were in the same ship. How'd they get in there? God commanded. And all of that time, 80 some odd years, maybe over 100 years that Noah had been preaching. And he could only save his own family. There's got to be a lesson there for us. Mm-hmm. And we ought to be sad that there's that many who rejected it. Yeah, and God would have stopped it. I mean, the first drop of rain, if they would have repented, but they didn't. And so you have, and the difference is one is a common cause and one is a common fellowship that we have. And there are, I was watching a program where in Washington, some of the Democrats and some of the Republican senators get together every morning and pray. They have the bills that they are confronted with, and they pray together over those bills that God's will be done. Now, you're not going to see that on TV. And, we get the idea that every one of them's rotten. I don't know how many are. I know it would be a very difficult place to be, Alonzo, with religious convictions. Very difficult. Because you have civil law that you're voting on, but you also have your convictions. All right, any questions?
Like some of what you said, it's almost like in a lot of the churches of Christ as a whole, they're scared to death to address politics.
Okay.
You've got to have separation of church and state. You can't mix the two. And it's like I was telling you the other day. You cannot separate. Like James Carville, if none of you have heard of him, he was Bill Clinton's mouthpiece. As powerful liberal as they come. He was in the debate, and some people said, well, I don't want to mess with politics. I get tired of it, I'm sick of it. And Carville said, and he was right here, you better pay attention because politics has to do with almost every aspect of your life, Christian or not.
And we live in two kingdoms. I know that we stress that we live where? In the kingdom of God. But does the kingdom of this world affect us or not? Every single day. And the closer that this kingdom is to God's kingdom, the easier our lives would be. And I don't know. And I just make one reason that Christians and sometimes are afraid to put anything on social media. Let's just say John's a teacher. And he writes something in there. 15 years from now, after John has tenure, they can come back in, they can say, we saw what you wrote 15 years ago. You're fired. And I watched a program about a man who had saved up. Back in the early 200s, he was making $63,000 a year. His company terminated him. And he said, this is all right. I've got 2 years severance coming from that company. After 6 months, that company went bankrupt. He lost his severance and he lost his retirement. And so a lot of people, I don't know why, not why, that we can sit in a pew and when it comes down to Arkansas playing, let's just say Alabama, in the final Super Bowl, we can sit in a pew and we can argue, we can get red in the face, we defend our team and then go on down to Pizza Hut and have a pizza. But brethren, do you realize that in churches we could not talk about COVID without running some people off? We have forgotten who we're committed to. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to talk. Listen, I can stand here and talk about Volvos all I want. And you say, well, I hate Volvos. Guess what? Doesn't bother me at all. I like a Volvo, so I drive what? Someone told me that what you own now is not a motorcycle. A motorcycle got 2 wheels. That's ugly. I said, well, I got two two-wheelers, but it shouldn't make any difference. I know what I believe. And I ought to be comfortable with it. I ought to be able to discuss it, argue about it, and when it's over, it's over. But what we do not respect anymore is not the discussion. It is the integrity of the person. I may disagree with you on politics, but I have a high regards for your integrity. And now, no, not anymore. If you don't agree with me, it's over. And that happens in the church. It's the society we live in. Mm-hmm. I just tell you on Donna. Donna wants communication between me and her on the motorcycle. I hear what she's saying. I pretend I don't. But now if I've got earplugs up here and she's got a mic, here's what I hear. You're too close to the yellow line, aren't you? I know how to drive. I don't need advice. Bob was telling Mark, plumber's tape, you know what I'm talking about? You put it on and you go in the direction that you're going to screw the pipe on, so when you're screwing the pipe on, you don't take the tape off. And there's Bob telling Mark. Then Mark goes to turn the water off outside, and I'm telling, if you point that thing in the direction of the pipe, and Mark said, I have been a fire chief for 60 years. Don't you think I know what I'm doing? And I thought, here am I telling Mark how to turn the water on and off at a house. And I got the point real quick. All right, you can join with a common interest as long as it does not pull you away from your allegiance with Christ. I don't care who gets the credit. Abortion's wrong. If they get out here and march for great men and I'll march with them. But a lot of time we're guilty by association. And that was true of lectureships. If a certain person spoke on a lectureship, the whole lectureship was bad. I never could understand that. And I tell them, I said, I was in the elevator with Louise Mandrell, and I still can't sing, still can't play an instrument. Someone else said, well, they'll do this to preachers or lectureships. Well, if it sounds like a duck and waddles like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Who came up with that nonsense? It looks like a Harley. It sounds like a Harley. It must be a Harley. No, this is a Yamaha. And we have associated people with some of these slogans that we have just totally wrong. All right, thank you for your time and attention. It's good to have the mics back. Thanks to Alex and Will and the new system by Mark Cunningham. And we'll have the new projectors up when they get the mics. They'll have drop-down mics, so that'll be great. Thank you.